You're watching Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall. Live look at Tel Aviv on what is now Wednesday morning in the Middle East, just past 4:30 in the morning as we tape this. Israeli strikes are intensifying as Iran is widening its response. Israel stepping up attacks on Iranian missile launchers and weapons factories, while Iran is firing dozens of ballistic missiles at Israel and launching drone attacks across the Gulf, including hitting the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia and a parking lot outside the U.S. consulate in Dubai. Meanwhile, President Trump is saying that Operation Epic Fury is ahead of schedule, thanks to the early elimination of Iran's top leaders. Let's bring in Professor Alon Burstein. He is the host of the Israel-Palestine-Report. A lot of people are wondering, Alon, about Iran's leadership structure. President Trump has said not only has the supreme leader been killed, but dozens of other top Iranian leaders as well. How are you quantifying how much damage has been done to the Iranian regime in recent days?
As always, good to see you, Austin. So we have to look at this when it comes to the damage to the Iranian regime. And sorry that I'm looking down. There's alarm bells going off in Israel's south right now that possibly missiles are on their way. That's why, if you see, looking down, flashing, there's, according to reports, there's like missiles headed around for Beersheba around this area over
Israel's south, would that mean it's coming from Gaza? Possibly?
No. The alarms are about missiles from Iran. It's the southern regions is like this area, because the way ballistic missiles coming from Iran, there's a much longer time of alert. So this is a pre-alert saying missiles have been launched. Now they're trying to be intercepted along the way. If they fail, then in about 3 or 4 minutes, you'll see me looking down again because they'll be calling on people in this area to go into bomb shelters. But from Gaza, you have like 30 seconds. So like that's the difference. That's why this is like a pre-warning that there might be missiles coming to the south. But it just goes to show that like this is still ongoing all the time.
Absolutely.
In terms of how much damage has been done to the regime, so I would divide that into two. First of all, there's the fact that the regime has been shown to be unable to defend its people, and the military has been shown to be, I'm not going to go as far as to say a paper tiger, because they're certainly causing a lot of damage, but when it comes to the ability to defend Iran, it's showing that all the money that was poured in has just not paid off. According to reports that came out today, the United States has attacked over 1,700 targets in Iran since the operation began. Israel reported today that it has dropped over 4,000 bombs in Iran. Now, Iran's very big by comparison to the war that you and I usually cover, situation in Gaza or Lebanon. Iran's very big. So, it's not to say that all these bombs are all falling in Tehran. At the same time, that's a monumental amount of weaponry. And that has really gone a long way. First of all, to eat away at the regime's sense of self-confidence and portrayal. A regime is supposed to be able to defend its borders. But more than that, it's also done a very crippling job for Iran's leadership structure. We all know, obviously, Ali Khamenei has been killed. Many of the different top brass of the different security apparatuses, if it's the commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, if it's the chief of staff, if it's the minister of defense, they have all been assassinated also in the first or second days. According to many reports, Israel has now gone to trying to assassinate the next level, sort of the middle brass of the different security establishments. Not a lot of reports about how much success there has been. It's possible because those aren't household names, so they're not being advertised as much. But one of the reasons also that it's not making as many headlines is because what Israel turned to doing, like the United States is still focusing on attacking the Iranian military, the Navy, the Army, and the ballistic missiles. What Israel has turned to doing is also damaging the regime in a different way, and that is targeting the security apparatuses that are in charge of suppressing rebellion. The police, the Basij, that's sort of the local neighborhood watches. And there's even rumors that Israel has been attacking the border areas between Iran and Iraq in order to facilitate the entrance of possibly armed militias from Iraq. And they're doing this, first of all, strategically, because they want to facilitate the protesters coming out, so they're trying to attack the centers of repression. Some have argued also that they're doing this out of frustration, that they're doing this because Israel and the United States had expected the protesters to be coming out in droves already, and they are not. Some people have said that they were not called to come out. They've been called to come out by many opposition leaders and by Netanyahu and by Trump, and it has not happened yet. So that Israel is now moving to, okay, let's try to suppress the repression mechanisms. Maybe that's why they're not coming out in droves. That's speculation. At this point, the attacks are still centering on the centers of command when it comes to the command structure, but they're more focusing on the local repressive mechanisms like the local police stations rather than re-attacking again and again the new Secretary of Defense or the new Chief of Staff.
The image on our screen is Beirut. About 24 hours ago alone, we were tracking IDF strikes in real time, aiming for Hezbollah targets. I'm going to keep a close eye on the camera tonight. It's possible we'll see more military activity. Hezbollah and the IDF have been going at it. We'll get to that in a moment. Before we move on from the questions about Iran's leadership, where does the search for the Supreme Leader's replacement stand today? Is that even clear to us?
So today was actually quite a big day when it comes to the attempts of Iran to both portray that they have not been defeated and also to de facto actually reestablish their governing mechanisms. And one of the things that I said when the Supreme Leader was killed is this is not like Gaddafi or Assad, where it was just a dictator holding power. Here, Khamenei was a dictator, but there's a well-oiled machine underneath him that is meant to select the next in line after he is killed, or if he would have just died in office, like happened to his predecessor, Ruhollah Khomeini, who died in 1989. And that mechanism is supposed to be a council of, depends how you translate it, council of experts, council of guardians. Essentially, it's a council of religious clerics, 84 or 88 of them, and they were supposed to meet in order to elect a new Supreme Leader. And then the Supreme Leader basically has everything invested in him. Now, they were supposed to meet, no one knew exactly when. They met today, and apparently they've been meeting already for several days, and what could have been a critical juncture within the war is that Israel tried to bomb that meeting. There was a bombing of a building in the city of Qom where they were supposed to meet. That building was destroyed, and Israel was trying to effectively wipe out the ability to now appoint a new Supreme Leader. Now, according to most reports, that attempt failed. The building was destroyed, but they were not meeting there. Different explanations. Some people say that Iran knew that it was going to be targeted, so they met somewhere else. Some explanations say that there was actually an old building, they weren't going to meet there. Mostly what's been put out is that they're actually meeting virtually because they know that they're going to be the targets of assassinations. But anyway, they are meeting now, and there's some rumors that are starting to be circulated about who is going to be the person elected. There were about 6 people that were slated to likely be the next in line to be the Supreme Leader, and 2 of the top running were someone called Ali Raza Arafi, who was part of the Council of Experts himself and was known to be someone who was close to Khamenei, but more of a scholar, someone who's not necessarily an extremist politician. And the other one was Mujtaba Khamenei, the son of Ali Khamenei. And he was also someone who was a close advisor to his father. Some called him the gatekeeper to his father. And he is known as a radical through and through. He is actually himself on the sanctioned list of the United States from 2019. He was very public about the fact that the protesters should all just be shot down in the streets. According to the rumors that were spread today, it is likely to be Mujtaba Khamenei who is elected to be the next Supreme Leader. Now, again, I stress that's rumors. They were published in an opposition paper, an Iranian opposition paper that's actually advertised in Europe, Iran International. Israeli intelligence also said that that's what they suspect, but I'm not sure if they're not just quoting the source from Iran International. And we don't know at this point. Now, if he is elected, that's going to tell us several things. First of all, it's going to tell us he's likely to be at least the target of an assassination, whether it succeeds or fails. But more than that, his election signals the balance of power. Mujtaba Khamenei was the favored of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. The Iranian Revolutionary Guards see the role of Supreme Leader as someone who's supposed to guide them, and they wanted someone who was going to be more radical, more ideologically committed, not someone who's going to go the way of the president of Iran right now, Masoud Pezeshkian, who is more of a moderate and trying to find some sort of accommodation as a way to climb down from this. So we don't know if he was elected, in fact, and if so, we obviously don't know what he'll do. But if he was elected, that's going to signal to us the balance of power that's leaning actually more towards the radicals at this point, which is surprising to some people because they thought maybe the council would decide it's time to back down. Maybe not.
So just to get something clear, a lot of us read reports. There were a lot of reports going around that intelligence had led to a strike that targeted where Iranian leaders were convening in order to think through a path forward on the Iranian leadership. You're saying that that strike very well may not have been as successful as some of these reports are indicating.
That's what I've been seeing. So there are several things. First of all, there's the fact that in Iran they immediately denied this. Now that doesn't tell us a lot. They also immediately denied that Khamenei was killed when he was killed. But they did supply some evidence to show that actually the council had not met in that building for a long time. A second thing, and this is just my own personal analysis, I was looking at the different images that were all being put up by Iranian civilians. They were passing by the building, taking pictures, and there were no emergency vehicles around there. And if the Council of Guardians is meeting, then certainly there will be emergency vehicles, and certainly if there's an attack and they are injured or killed, there'll be lots of emergency vehicles. I didn't see any. Now, that's not, conclusive evidence. That's just my own personal analysis, but that led me to also say it is possible that this was not as successful. And there's also the fact that in Israel, they haven't said anything about that. They said they attacked that building and that's it. And Israel, unlike the United States, Israel is being very, very open about what it's attacking, when it's attacking, and why it's attacking. There's a lot of reasons that are internal. It has to do with the fact that a lot of Israelis are sitting in bunkers, so they're trying to show them that the military is trying to actually work, and it's not just you're sitting in bunkers and nothing's happening. A lot of it also has to do with psychological propaganda. They're trying to boast to the world and to the Iranian people about what they're doing. But if Israeli intelligence had assumed that it was even partially successful, I would expect by now many, many different reports to be coming out saying that is likely the case. It was at least partially successful. Nothing's come out since that attack that was by now about 10 hours ago. So that's why I'm saying likely was not as successful as might have been hoped at the beginning.
Right. So the reason why we've been looking at this Beirut live feed is because I've been pretty much waiting to see if we see more clashing between the IDF and Hezbollah tonight. I mean, if anybody was watching us last night, they heard the blasts, they heard the gunfire. Just as the sun was coming up yesterday morning, we saw the IDF presumably targeting Hezbollah structures, and we later did hear from the IDF that they were in fact targeting some command centers and some artillery infrastructure as well. So let's talk about the Iranian proxies. This is one of the stories of the day alone. I want to ask you the same question I just asked David. Is this feeling like the beginning of the end for Iran's model of projecting power through armed proxies?
I mean, a lot of that depends on what happens within Iran itself. If and when the situation dies down and Iran manages to make its way to a deal, if a new leader comes up, and even if it's, Mujtaba Khamenei, but somehow he manages to turn a blind eye, and there's some sort of nuclear deal. Let's say there's a deal that they offer Trump, oil rights, and that Iran will actually give up all its nuclear material, but that's it. Trump may take that. Trump does not want to sink deeper into the war also. So he may take that. And at that point, the regime will have to rebuild itself. Now, it's going to need to rebuild itself through investing in its internal population, but it probably is also going to try to rebuild its proxies, maybe in a different model. Maybe they will have realized that the so heavy investments into Hezbollah that didn't pay off, maybe it's actually better to have many smaller militias spread throughout the Middle East, like in Iraq. In Iraq, the smaller militias, they're harder to target, they're harder to subdue. So it's possible that we're going to start to see a different model. That's if the regime survives. If the regime does not survive, if it ends up going to either an ongoing war, either a physical occupation by another country, or an internal rebellion, then we're actually going to see a very interesting thing because the proxies are going to fracture. And then each proxy is going to be on its own, depending on its own political situation. In Lebanon, that may be the final straw that gets Hezbollah to lay down its arms, have its people reincorporate into the Lebanese military and become a political party. In Yemen, in turn, that may actually be the fuel that leads the Houthis to expand their fight against Saudi Arabia now, because if before they were based on the balance of power when Iran wants them to fight and not, now it'll be entirely up to them. Iraq, we have several different militias there, Khatib Hezbollah, Hashd al-Sha'abi. Those militias also operate to a large extent at the behest of Iran. If Iran is no longer operating them, that's the makings of a rogue militias that lead to civil war, because that's his warlords now coming up. So chances are, if there is this revolutionary change in Iran, we will see the proxies each going their own separate way. And the way they go is going to depend each time on their own internal situation. One last thing I want to say about Hezbollah is Hezbollah seems to be going down the track that I was speaking to you yesterday briefly, and we said that why has Hezbollah all of a sudden woken up? And I speculated that the reason is that they're trying to draw the IDF essentially into a ground invasion of Lebanon. They want to see Israeli troops being bogged down in the Lebanese mud and possibly facing casualties. And that'll be a way to start fermenting internal distress within Israel on why is this war going on forever. The reason why I say that is likely what Hezbollah is trying to do is because throughout the day, in this past 24 hours, they carried out, again, very, very minimal rocket launching, 9, 10 rockets. They claimed responsibility 9 different times. They are screaming, there is a target on me, come and get me, come and get me, right? They're not trying to hide this, they're not trying to do anything. There was rumors there was a rocket fired from Gaza earlier today. No one said anything about it. Not Hamas, not Palestinian Islamic Jihad. It was just, an alert went off and disappeared. Hezbollah is screaming, please come and join us into another fight. There were reports that the IDF did send ground troops into Lebanon yesterday, more ground troops than the 5 positions it already holds. Israel put out a statement saying that was because Hezbollah was amassing some forces on the border, so the ground troops came in, they withdrew. But that's already an indication that Hezbollah is succeeding. It's succeeding in drawing Israel into this. What effect that'll have on Iran obviously remains to be seen, but that's that situation.
The Houthis, they have not been as active as they have been in past conflicts alone, and we're talking about the Strait of Hormuz. We just had this map up, kind of giving people an idea of the lay of the land. Gosh, how many times have the Houthis come up during times of contention like this? And you're sure not hearing a lot out of Yemen lately.
We're not, and that's actually surprising because the Houthis, and they on that map, if you see the bottom part of Saudi Arabia, they're right underneath that, and there's the other strait, the Strait of Aden. It's just underneath the map there. And that's where the Houthis can really choke off the world's trade supply in a different way. It's far from as scary to world economy as choking off the Straits of Hormuz. Strait of Hormuz, again, between 1/4 and 1/5 of the world's energy exports go through there daily. Cutting that off immediately sends shockwaves to the markets. It immediately sends shockwaves. We had both Europe and China screaming in the last 24 hours, oh my God. In Europe, we saw that the markets reacted a little bit. China sent messages to Iran saying, we ask you not to cut off the exports of liquid gas from Qatar and Arab Emirates, we need that. Meanwhile, the Houthis have said that they're gonna respond, and they haven't. I honestly cannot tell you why. One speculation that I have is they're waiting to have this a staged reaction. Just like Hezbollah waited 2 or 3 days, it's possible that Iran wants things to, if Israel invades Lebanon and gets stuck down there for 3 days, 4 days, all of a sudden the Houthis start firing missiles. And now we have another front in Yemen. Like it may be that that's part of the strategy. It may also be a strategy that if the Straits of Hormuz are blocked for a while, then they're open, then the Straits of Aden be closed. There might also be things that we just don't know. Just like last time, it was February, it was actually about a year ago. It was February of 2025 when there were secret negotiations between the Trump administration and the Houthis, and all of a sudden they come out with a deal cutting Israel out, saying you can still attack Israel, but don't attack US ships. It is very possible that there's also secret indirect talks between the administration and the Houthis saying, you be quiet and we'll leave you be. You don't be quiet, you're gonna now suffer major wrath. Look at the armada that we have around you. So that's also, again, pure speculation on my part, but just is also a possibility.
Right, and just to make something clear, I dropped the graphics here for people that are curious where Yemen is on the map. You just basically got to go just south of Saudi Arabia here, and you see the entire Red Sea just basically to the west of Saudi Arabia. Yes. Okay, Alon, a final question for you. While we're looking at this map showing some of the Gulf states, I want to basically ask you something that I asked you on your live stream a couple days ago. How would you have characterized Iran's relationship with Gulf states before this weekend, and how has that relationship changed now that we've started to see Iranian missiles landing in many of these countries?
Until now, Iran was always the menacing threat to people in the Gulf. The Arab Gulf states have always seen Iran as a big rival. And the reason is both geopolitical and has to do, sorry, I'll say it differently. The reason is both sort of religious and as a result of ethnic divisions between the Arab world and the Persian world, but also between Shiites and Sunnis, that Iran leads the Shiite world and the Arab states, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, United Arab Emirates, they are all Sunni. So there was a historic rivalry that then also fed into that the geopolitical facets. That has to do with the balances of alliance. The United States allied with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain. Therefore, Iran got closer to way back when the Soviet Union, and now Russia and China. So there's the alliance. And then there's also obviously the competition over oil exports and the natural gas exports and basically resources. So until now, Iran was always a menacing threat. There was always fear. Iran did attack Saudi oil fields in 2019. There has been tensions in the past, but it's never actually escalated beyond that. It's always been sort of like a Cold War. One of the things that's been interesting about the balance of power between Iraq, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Iran, all of these, there was sort of an unwritten code that we can be rivals all we want, that some of these countries have gone to war even, Iraq and Iran certainly, and Iraq and Kuwait, but there was an unwritten code, we're not attacking each other's natural resources. Very rarely were there attacks against refineries or actual oil fields or gas mines or things like that, because they all depend on the stability of this. And Iran has now broken that code. So regardless of what happens, unless there's a complete regime change in Iran and a new friendly face to the Gulf countries comes up, once this dies down, we're looking at a new situation. If before it was rivalries, but almost like a mutual respect, now it's going to be, we're probably looking at an arms race, because the Gulf countries and Saudi Arabia are probably going to be investing billions of dollars in defense, because Iran has shown that if push comes to shove, the unwritten codes of, it's not in the rules of war, but it's in our local rules of war. We don't attack each other's energy supplies and oil fields. That's off the table anymore.
Hal was on earlier, and I asked him basically about the fact that there's these incidents in Dubai, and I'll just read a little bit of the reporting from these incidents. An Iranian drone slammed into a parking lot outside the U.S. consulate in Dubai. It started a small fire, Secretary Rubio said. Also, we saw on Monday that the embassy in Riyadh was hit by 2 drones from Iran. The pace of the Iranian missiles is seeming to slow, Alon. But these are reminders that these Iranian drones and missiles, they can still get through the interceptors.
So the pace of Iranian missiles is slowing, and there was actually a study that was put out in Israel today. Usually, they do not actually report on how many missiles are fired, because they don't want Iran, or they don't want basically anyone to know like how many are successfully intercepted and how many not. But there was a study that was put out that shows that Iran has fired just under 200 missiles to Israel, 90 in the first day, 65 in the second day, 25 in the third day, 20 in the fourth day. So the number is going down very likely as a result of, and that's fired, not what managed to get to Israel. Most of those are intercepted. Mainly, the numbers are going down as a result of successful attacks against the actual launchers. They're being carried out by the United States military and by Israel. But one of the differences when it comes to the Gulf states is it is a lot harder to actually intercept these things when it comes from Iran to the Gulf states because of sheer distance. You and I were talking by now, wow, it's almost 2 years ago. We were talking about the first time that Iran fired missiles and drones towards Israel, right? There were 8 hours that cruise missiles and drones were on their way. In turn, a drone from Iran to Kuwait takes about 30 minutes. And that's 30 minutes. Right now, there are literally dozens, if not hundreds, of airplanes and fighter planes and helicopters in the air, drones from everywhere, and you need to find that one drone that is now being fired from Iran to Kuwait, from Iran to Qatar. That is a lot harder, and those are drones. Missiles also will go much faster. So Bahrain and Qatar both put out different statements today about how much they have managed to intercept. Bahrain said it has intercepted 74 Iranian missiles. Qatar said it's intercepted, I believe, 25 drones. But this is something that's still going to be ongoing, and this is where Iran has, to some extent, an advantage. That Iran right now, life there is discontinued, right? There's obviously no economy that's functioning. Country's not functioning. But what it needs to do is bring the war home to every other country that it can, so that everyone else is screaming, stop the war. And so it's enough to have a drone once a day target one of the airports, and that's why Iran is targeting the airports in Kuwait, the airports in Dubai, because that's going to disrupt international shipping also, and going to disrupt tourism, going to disrupt a lot of things. That's enough for Iran to make sure that the war is coming home to all these other countries, so they're all pressuring the United States. So a lot of this is intercepted, but even if one of those gets through, that's enough to damage the United Arab Emirates. A lot of its economy depends on business coming and going, depends on, they have a very, very popular international airport that's a hub. Drones start hitting there, even every 3 or 4 days, that's gonna really damage them. So yes, it's true that Iran is its ability to carry out massive damage does appear to be going down. However, the damage that it carries out, it's at least hoping, is going to be enough to get countries to still be pressured in order to pressure the United States to try to back down from the situation. I would just say a lot of this really does depend on who the new leadership in Iran is, if they make that public even or not, because they may not. They may decide he will be assassinated, let's not. Trump put out 2 seemingly contradictory statements throughout the day. One of them was Iran's leadership wanted to talk to me, and I said it's too late. And the other was said between the lines. I think it was an interview to the Atlantic, I don't remember. It was quoted in several different outlets today. And there he said, if there are elements in Iran's regime that survive that want to talk, I'm willing to talk. That's 2 contradictory things. But essentially, that's an invitation to say, if you want to talk, you have to come to me. I'm not going to say I want a deal anymore. If you want to talk, you have to come to me and make a sweet offer. That may still happen. That really depends on the leadership. And Iran is just hoping that there'll be enough badgering of neighboring countries and enough damage caused to neighboring countries so that they're all up in arms, so that when they come and make some sort of deal to Trump, maybe Trump will take it because all these other countries are screaming, it's enough now, we can't withstand this. That's at least what I think Iran's hoping to achieve with this.
Professor Alon Burstein is the host of the Israel-Palestine-Report on YouTube and many other social platforms. How can people follow your coverage and your teachings?
Like you said, look me up on YouTube, the Israel-Palestine Report. You can go to my website. We're running all kinds of online courses on the history of the Middle East and what's happening. Sometimes they see Austin there. Sometimes they meet lots of interesting people. We'd love to see anyone there.
I love to comment questions on the live stream chats. Alon, good to see you. Have a good night.
Have a good night.